Good morning.
Yeah.
Just by way of quick introduction, if you haven't been on sessions yet and seen our beautiful mugs, I am Ben Rodin. I'm a product marketing manager here at Smarty. I deal primarily with our address enrichment products and our finance and fintech vertical. Ryan, let us know who you are and what you stand for.
Yeah, I'm Ryan. I'm a product marketing manager as well. Deal mostly with geocoding and insurance here at Smarty in particular. So I'm just going to be in the background, kind of hosting this session, onboarding elegance, and I'm happy to turn the time over to Ben Rodin. Take it away, Ben.
Beautiful. Our shenanigans are cheeky and fun, just as they should be. Okay, give me just a second to get this presentation rolling. Quick note as I go through this, if at any point you have questions or comments, feel free to chime in or raise your hand and we can stop. We're not precious about this at all. Ryan, I apologize for leaving your name off the title slide. I needed to stroke my ego. So here I am, Ben Roden, PMM, enrichment. Um, we're going to talk about onboarding elegance. One of the things that's really interesting about Smarty, and really any technical product, is in a lot of cases, our grasp exceeds our reach. Meaning sometimes we haven't imagined ways we could make this product useful. When people come to Smarty, they often have a very specific and defined use case in mind, which is awesome, and we're happy to
Yeah,
have that. We're great at that. But in many cases, what you don't know represents missed opportunity. So what I'm going to kind of focus on today is some ways you can apply Smarty to improve customer experience, improve processes, and maybe think about Smarty in a new way. So that's my goal, is to maybe introduce some ideas that might get some juices flowing and might help you guys develop some new ideas about how we can help drive value for your business. So we're going to start with the F word, everybody's favorite word. It's got so many uses. You can plug it in so many different ways. I love the F word. In
it's
this case, it's not the most ideal word for your customers. That word is, of course, friction, right? Friction comes in many forms. We're at a moment in, I guess, a moment in time in the way that technology has developed where expectations from users and customers is at an all-time high. And there is very little tolerance for friction because of technology, because of increased quality of data intelligence and abundance of data intelligence. People really expect companies to have the right answer and have it quickly. So anytime you can remove friction, you stand to gain huge, benefits to your business. Um, People essentially don't want too many notes. I don't know if anyone has seen the film Amadeus, but anything that becomes too intricate or becomes too much of a burden on customers or users instantly damages your operations, your conversion rates, and ultimately your bottom line. And maybe most importantly, the trust that users and customers have in your brand or product. So how can we decrease the number of notes is of huge interest. The proof is in the pudding when it comes to this idea. HubSpot did an audit of 40,000 of their landing pages on their platform and found that reducing the form fields from 4 to 3, simply that small incremental change can increase conversions by as much as 35%. Um,
that's a
Obviously,
wild number there. Like,
it's a
that's a
crazy
lot.
number. It's a crazy number. Anytime we're dealing in full percentages,
Yeah,
as that reflects in your margins, it's huge, but 35% is transformative, right? Now, I think a lot of Smarty customers, we are blessed to have customers from a lot of different verticals and working in a lot of different industries. So I think there are cases where 4 to 3 doesn't make sense, right? A 4 or 3 field form is very simple. This is usually like lead capture. So you kind of have to take this result with a grain of salt. I think a lot of the industries that we're really successful in, whether that's insurance or healthcare or finance, fintech, a lot of the forms, even if you do optimize them, are going to be more than 4 fields. So let's think about that. If we're talking about longer form fields, we still see interesting and hugely transformative results. Um, a company called OpSearch did a similar study where they looked at longer forms and suggested that after 5 core form fields, anything extra can reduce conversions by 6 or 7%. So again, it's all proportional, right? And you're never gonna. There are certain processes that are never gonna have tiny forms, right? There are certain whether that's
Yeah.
uh, you know property and casualty insurance, whether that's healthcare. There are certain processes that require a lot of data inputs. We can't change that. But if we can find ways to streamline, if we can find a way to reduce the number of notes, reduce the complexity and friction that customers face, if we can find ways to sort of shoulder that as organizations, we can see huge effects. I was recently at Money 2020, and there was a panel dealing with identity fraud and how companies deal with authoritative data sources. Um, One of the comments that really stuck out to me, Will Charnley, who works at Liminal, they've done a ton of cross-sectional research. He said, we have to look for ways to collect customer data in the most elegant way possible. And so that's going to be kind of the focus of some of these different use cases and ideas that we dive into. So let's start with some sort of low-hanging fruit, a product that a lot of you guys have experience with, both in your businesses and likely as a consumer. That's address autocomplete. Now, Smarty has excellent address autocomplete. If you're not using it, essentially what it does is when you are entering an address, it will autofill verified addresses. You can associate this with the user's location. So it's only going to give them relevant addresses in their nearby vicinity. So what does that do? First of all, if you're using multi-form address fields, it's going to right off the bat decrease the number of fields. If you have a single address field, or you're using autocomplete to parse and fill multiple fields, that's a win right there. That's between 1 and maybe 4 address fields that a customer doesn't have to worry about ideally, which of course will increase conversion. It makes the forms faster, more responsive, and increases your conversion rate. You're going to reduce the input errors, which is going to solve a bunch of problems downstream, whether you're shipping products, whether it's database management, whether it's simply standardizing, whether it's a question of compliance or reporting. Everything going into your system, ideally, is going to be properly formatted and verified, which obviously is a win. Additionally, it's going to build trust. And I want to really quickly, for those of you who don't know, kind of deal or sort of dive into why Smarty specifically has some advantages here. A lot of people use the Google autocomplete, which is totally fine. It's not a bad product, but there are some advantages with Smarty, and there are interesting advantages when you stack Smarty up with various competitive products. But just as an example, this is my actual address. If you want to send me, fan mail or vaguely threatening ransom notes, you can send them here. So what I did is I typed my address into a site using Google's autocomplete and then a site using Smarty's autocomplete. One of the first things that I noticed was the not just that the address was verified, but the formatting and the sort of aesthetics of the address. So my actual address is 3372 West, 1910 North, Unit L202. What happens with a lot of autocomplete products, specifically when you're dealing with addresses in Utah, is that because Utah is so grid focused, Utah's addresses are very standardized in that way. Everything's built on a grid system.
Yeah.
You get these weird artifacts where an autocomplete product will try to enter a street name or struggles with the fact that you're only giving cardinal directions. So for example, the Google autocomplete said 1910th North, and it
Yeah.
also applied the wrong city. Instantly, there's this
Mhm.
question of trust. There's this question of like, okay, I think that's the right address, but it doesn't look like the right address.
It's disconcerting a little bit.
Disconcerting and maybe not disconcerting like, hey, is this company not on the up and up? I don't think it goes that
Yeah.
far. But it does introduce, I think, a breakpoint for the customer where it's like, okay, if this came back as I expected to come back, I'm clicking next. I'm moving to the next
Yeah.
step in that flow. But this gives me just enough pause that I might say, okay, well, especially if I'm buying a product, I want to make sure this is going to the right place. So this happens a lot when you're for me when I'm shopping online, especially because I live in an area that's like a lot of new construction, a lot of growth. There's
Yeah.
kind of like we recently changed zip codes. Anyway, there's a lot of kind of uncertainty, and so package delivery sometimes just doesn't work at my address. So when I run into this, my instinct is to say, okay, let me take this suggested address, let me plug it back into Google Maps and see what it spits out. See if it's actually reflective of where I'm actually at. So when I take the address from the Google autocomplete and the Smarty autocomplete, these are the results I get in terms of the geocode. So Google's showing me, okay, it's going to get at my complex, which is great. Um, but it might not get to my building. There are mailboxes here, but a lot of, like a UPS package is going to be at my doorstep.
Yeah.
Is the driver going to find it? Maybe. This fills me with a lot more confidence. Not only do I see this is my complex, this is the exact location of my unit. Again, I'm exposing a lot of information. So if you want to drop off cookies or whatever, you're welcome to.
Well,
Anyway,
and this is especially good too, Ben, where you're like, I mean, so much is we think about deliveries, so much of it is to your door now, right? Not even
right,
mailboxes anymore.
right.
So like if I'm sitting out there on the street, that's going to be real, tricky to figure out where exactly which unit it is, like which stairs are closest and those different things. And it's going to cause a major problem for the delivery driver.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are real effects to having an verified and accurate address. The point is, you don't want your customer even thinking about this. So address standardization, the way the address is rendered in an autocomplete context is just as important as whether the address is actually deliverable. So anyway, again, this is kind of low-hanging fruit. You can really easily grasp how this affects user experience. It's a great product for that reason. Okay, we're gonna make this a little bit more complex. So, as I mentioned earlier, Smarty gets plugged into a lot of scenarios and industries where there is increased complexity, where there are more moving parts. And what's interesting, Ryan and I were talking about this morning. When a company doesn't know information a user
Yeah.
expects them to know, it causes a lack of trust. I remember when maybe, 10, 15 years ago, there was this idea of like, oh no, we're living in a surveillance state. I know we've all had the
Yeah.
experience of like you're having a conversation about a snowmobile and then you start getting served ads and you're like, oh my gosh, they're watching us. It's maybe dystopian, but it's also there because we're so used to it, there has been a shift where it's like, hey, if the company doesn't know what I expect them to know, what kind of dog and pony show are they running?
Yeah,
What
right. Is this
you
even going to work? Is this
it
real?
makes you're I think unconsciously vetting these companies. So we're going to talk about how specific examples of how you can use these additional enrichment data sources to improve the process. But I think as we talk about that, think about how the user feels about this process when you know what they think you ought to know. It's really, really impactful. So that's kind of the soft benefit of all of this. Okay, so one example of a application process that is more complicated, and rightfully so, is insurance. So in this case, I went through an application flow for a large insurance company. I'm focusing just on homeowners insurance, and you'll see why. But you can think of ways that similar processes could be applied to different types of insurance. So the way this flow works is it starts the quote with the zip code. Kind of interesting. It makes a lot of sense to see, okay, is this person in my area of service? So we start with the zip code, and then I'm here filling in my name and address. What's interesting about this is already we're encountering ways where we can streamline this process using Smarty data. One really powerful data set that I think more people need to be aware of is US property data. So for every address in the USPS database, plus about 20 million non-US Postal Service addresses, we have exhaustive property data. That data comes in a lot of shapes and sizes. There are over 350 attributes spread across the location, the structure, and the financial profile of the property. So how can we apply that here? First of all, we do have owner name as one of the fields in this data set. So if you wanted, you could say, hey, let's query this enrichment API. Let's grab the owner name. If it's clearly owned by a company, we're not going to include this or autofill it. But if it's a person's name, we could potentially autofill this here. Again, with address autocomplete or verification, you can check for a verified address at this point in the flow. And again, right off the bat, we're cutting fields out and offering opportunities for streamlining. What's also,
Well,
oh, go ahead.
and and what I'm seeing though too is like, is it a company that owns it? Is it a person that owns it, right? Like you can see that and say, well, maybe it's a renter's policy that needs to be issued or a lessor's policy, something that's a little bit different than an owner's policy, right?
That's a great point. So yeah, so maybe you hit that API at this point and you see like, oh, this is clearly a title company or a co-op or whatever that owns the title.
Yeah.
Maybe at this point you serve the customer, hey, are you sure this is the right policy type? We suggest this.
Yeah.
Again, you are showing the customer you know what you ought to know, and you are avoiding a situation where they get 5 steps into an application realizing they're there for the wrong product and they bail. You're
Yeah.
introducing or you are um, sort of circumventing these breakpoints already.
Yeah. Making it more compliant. We do have a question, Ben.
Oh yeah,
Um, the question here is, what makes an address a non-postal address?
great question. So a non-postal address is there are certain areas where the USPS doesn't cover. A lot of times this is rural area. What is it? Is it Jackson Hole that's completely non-postal?
That's the one.
Yeah, so these are areas where they might use a PO box, they might use a shared mailbox. It's an
Mhm.
area where you could deliver a service or like a FedEx package, but you're not going to get mail there. Are
Yeah.
there other examples that I'm not thinking of, Ryan?
That's a really solid one, I think, honestly. Like that's a good one to look at.
Cool. Let us know if there are additional questions. But yeah,
Yeah.
just any places where I can, generally speaking, a building or a property where I can get services or packages, but not the US mail.
Yeah.
Oh, great question. Okay, so moving on. And again, this is the existing process. I'm talking about ways we could improve it. So another thing I thought was interesting, at this point, it says if you would like to change your state or zip code, you can start over. Um,
Mhm.
that's a point of frustration for me immediately. If I'm just simply starting with an address entry, that question doesn't come up. So anyway, thought that was kind of interesting. It's going to ask if it's your current address. We potentially have some ways we could game that as well, but we'll skip that for now. Okay, next part of the flow is we need a few details about your home. Do I know when my home was built? Do you know off the top of your head, Ryan?
Yes, but only because I moved there last year. So, but
Yeah,
most of the time, no.
I struggle remembering the ages of my children. I certainly
Yeah.
don't know the year my home was built to the year. I know a range, right? So
Right.
this is another example where it's like, okay, you're asking the customer to do some work, whether that's checking a record, whether that's, hey, let me text my husband, let me text my wife. Maybe you know it off the top of your head.
Yeah.
Do you know square footage off the top of your head? I don't. Again,
No.
I know about what it is. Uh,
Yeah.
these are both fields that we have in our property data product. So you could, via API, already know this based on the address entry. So now you have essentially two full uh, processing steps or two steps, two basically page loads that you are avoiding.
So you just eliminate this whole question
You
pretty
can
much.
completely bring that in-house, absorb that complexity on yourself.
Ah,
Okay, so what happens in the flow next is it takes me to this sort of review screen where it says, "Hey, this is what we've input so far. Um, is this correct?" This is super interesting because it's not correct remotely. To test this, I actually put in a fake year my home was built. So it's going to say, okay, yeah. And I put in a fake square footage. So it's going to say, yeah, this is what you gave us.
Yeah.
And then this stuff, I don't know. I don't know what the data source is here. I suspect
Yeah.
these are just defaults because none of this information is correct. I don't have a fireplace. It's a single story building. Anyway, so this is interesting because again, you're saying, hey, we're going to give you defaults. If a customer doesn't know, are they just going to go to the next step and
Yeah.
continue with a completely inaccurate quote? There's that alternative. The alternative the other way they can go is to click into each of these, and then they're like overwhelmed with all these options of like, okay, well,
Yeah.
I know how many stories I have. I know whether or not I have a fireplace and a garage, but I certainly don't know the exterior wall type. I'd have to probably look up my foundation type. These are all things we can get in property data. The other thing that's
Yeah.
super interesting is in addition to these specific attributes they're asking you about, if you click update in the overall home description, this application shows you some preset categories for these different homes. So an economy home says this applies to less than 5% of homes. They're rarely more than 1,600 square feet. These homes may have lower quality carpet paint, inexpensive wallpaper, vinyl sheet flooring, laminate countertops, etc. So for each of these categories, there's sort of a pre-existing profile that includes home features, includes square footage, includes home amenities, it includes materials. What if there was some product that you could use to sort of pre-calculate this?
For
There
the first
are
pass.
there are things that we don't have, obviously. Uh, you know, Carpet type, flooring and countertops. There are things that we can't get, but we can get we can really push the ball along in sort of estimating the range of home type, right?
Yeah.
You could take this a step further. You could say, hey, let's grab the geocode. Let's get a geocode of this home. Let's use reverse geocoding to query property data for the 10 nearest homes. Look at all the profiles in terms of square footage, in terms of build materials, home age, and then feed that user a recommendation. Hey, based on homes in your area, it's likely that you fall into um, this category. Does this seem right to you? Again, you're showing the customer we know what we ought to know. You can
Yeah.
confirm or deny, and if it's inaccurate, we can delve into it. But for someone who is looking for a insurance policy, the easier you can make that, the faster you can get them to a quote, the more successful you're going to be. So
Yeah.
huge, huge opportunities to streamline here. Okay, finally, well, not finally, because there are additional steps. The next
Yeah.
step is it's going to suggest perils, wind and hail deductible. Before I started talking to Ryan, before I started working with Smarty, I had never heard peril in the context of home insurance. Can you talk a little bit about what a peril is for us, Ryan?
Yeah. Perils are exposures or things, natural hazards especially, but there's also crime and different things like that. Perils that could cause a claim to occur. They could be what triggers the claim. And having gone through and been a licensed agent at one point in my life, like that makes sense to me. But perils, as a novice, I might look at them and be like, perils, like, am I in peril? Like, what kind of peril? Like, my only
Yeah,
reference is like superheroes, right? Doesn't make a lot of sense.
excellent. So yeah, there's clearly this is not easily accessible, which is why they have a tooltip, which is great CX on their part. They're giving somebody a door into it. However, what if rather than asking someone to like estimate a deductible,
Estimate it. Yeah.
and to their credit, they are providing an estimate. What another product that Smarty has is U.S. property risk data. So U.S. property data and U.S. property risk data, not to be confused, U.S. property risk data allows you, again, in a single API call to pull about 460 risk attributes from FEMA's risk database. That'll give you risk assessments and annual loss estimates for 18 individual natural hazards, as well as some kind of more general risk indexing.
Yeah.
So here is another opportunity to give a more accurate and more personalized estimate on needed deductibles,
Yeah.
and build that customer trust to say, hey, based on the risk data associated with this location, this is the deductible that we suggest. How powerful is it to A, give them that estimate, B, have data, individual like data citations to say, okay, well, how did you calculate this? Well, if
Yeah.
I click in, I can show you these are natural hazards that you're at risk of. Same thing with wind and hail. These are specific risk attributes that we can query and then provide a very thorough and I guess sourceable or citable
Yeah.
methodology so people understand not only why this is important, but how we're coming to the conclusion that we're coming to.
And it's information like wind, hail, tsunami, hurricane,
Right.
wildfire, stuff like that, volcano.
Heat wave, cold wave. There's a ton of
Yeah.
stuff we can bake into this. Yeah. Again, super, super cool. So, okay. So, with all this being said, think about all the time we've spent talking about all these different fields. Think about if you are in this application process, how much time it's taken you to get to this point. Obviously, it's a big purchase. There's an expectation that it's going to take a good amount of time. Imagine, though, if everything we've talked about happened behind the scenes, rather than starting with a put in my zip code, then put in my name and address. What if the entire entry form for this initial section of the application or quote is, hey, enter your address?
Yeah.
And then the customer is instantly delivered to a results screen where we say, hey, we already got this. All of this is verified based on public records and data sources associated with your home. All you have to do is tell us whether it's incorrect or not. So again, hey, we pulled this name from the title. Is this you? If it's not, update it. Great. Hey, these are all verified results on year built, square footage, stories, roof type, number of rooms, uh, property square footage versus structure square footage. All of this stuff is there. All you have to do is say, hey, yeah, this is right. Additionally, on this same screen, you could provide, hey, based on our risk calculations and property data audit, these are the deductibles we suggest. At that point, you can move them on to the next step of the application. So anyway, here's just a great example of a very complicated and very thorough application process that you can hugely simplify. At the base level, I mean, let's look at this. So we've got one, two, three, four. That's part of the same one. Five page loads to one page load. We don't have that specific data, but I imagine the conversion rate jump there is huge, right? So anyway,
Yeah.
cool example there. Now, the next example, and I know that I guess we
We got a little time.
we got a little time. We've talked about address autocomplete as a way to really quickly engender confidence and capture valid addresses. So that's kind of the basic version. We've talked about in a more involved flow, let's say, how using these different data sources can help improve conversion and increase confidence and faith in your brand and company. Another example is what if you could use data to replace an in-person process or to more thoroughly transform your operations, to go above and beyond, hey, let's make the forms better to let's completely change the way we do business. This is an actual case study. It's anonymized and we're using some stock art, but this is a real case from a real Smarty user. We're hoping to actually write a case study about this pending approval a little bit later in the year. So you may be able to read about this in full detail. Here's the idea. So this is a pest control and home services company. They do lawn and pest care. and tree care. It's sort of like a mid-sized regional company, so they're servicing multiple states. Historically, their process has looked something like this. This company prices their services based on linear square footage and a number of other property features depending on the service. But essentially, what happens is if I'm a user, I come to the website, I type in my address, and I click Get a Quote. Now, what happens after input is we're going to say, hey, based on the zip code or based on the geocode of the address, we're going to first determine whether I'm in service or out of service. If I'm out of service, I get a, hey, we don't service in your area. Thanks for your interest. Maybe we'll give you some recommendations on companies we like in the area. If they're in service, still on the website, I'm taken to like a standard scheduling module, schedule a service. Okay, so that's great. That's pretty standard. Now, everything in this white box is now happening in person, right? So transparent box is in the web experience, white box is happening in person. So what happens then is a technician, again, this is somebody who is a trained service technician, not necessarily a trained salesman, uh, goes to the site. They're going to knock on the door. They're going to try and find the address. They're going to hope the person's home. They're going to say, "Hey, I need to look around your property to like give you an accurate quote." So they're going to conduct measurements, all while under the pressure of like, "Hey, I need to get this done quickly. I need to give an accurate quote." They're going to make measurements to the best of their ability. They're going to give the quote. They're going to hope the person says yes. Hey, okay, this sounds good. I'm good with this. They're going to sign off. They'll take payment there. They'll pull out their iPad or whatever, and then the technician's going to complete service. Nothing wrong with this. It's how a lot of businesses operate. However, what would happen if you completely front-loaded this process using address enrichment data? This is how they do business now. So the flow starts the same way. The customer types in their address, and they get an instant determination about whether or not this address is in the service area. But what's happening behind the scenes and what's happening instantly is that the company is querying Smarty's property data database or property data product to get the lot square footage, the building square footage, the roof type, and the foundation type, all of which are instantly used to calculate an accurate quote. Again, this entire flow, I know there's a lot of arrows here. I've sort of gilded the lily. I've undone the simplicity of this. All of this happens instantly when the person enters their address. They are then taken to the schedule service module with a quote already in place, already verified by the system and calculated according to the company's methodology. I can then schedule my service and submit payment. So you have an experience where I enter my address, I instantly get a personalized quote, I schedule my service, and I submit payment. So now you're collecting payment within a minute, typically, of the user deciding they are interested in a quote. So this is awesome, right? You're increasing that payment velocity. You're providing a much more modern and sort of confidence building CX experience. You're also making life so much easier for the technician, right? All the technician has to do now is show up to the property. Maybe they're going to knock on the door, say, "Hey, just so you know, I'm here." They complete the service. That's done. So you're making your tech's life easier. You're getting faster payments. You are decreasing the time it takes to service any property, right? When you remove the square footage measurement and quoting aspect, now your techs are able to service more homes more quickly. Your CX scores go up. It's a huge win. So this is, again, there are ways to make forms themselves better. If you're even more creative and even more committed to this idea, you can find ways to completely revolutionize. Ryan, you and I have made up some good words on
Yeah,
this
we do.
session. We've got revolutionize, we've got presentate,
Presentate.
where we are just stunning scholars in the English language. Anyway, as you can see, there's a ton of opportunity using these various data sources. Um, One thing that was really interesting, specifically with this customer, sorry, I should say Smarty customer, the pest control company, is they found that their quote accuracy vastly increased. So because because A, it's sometimes a big task based on the shape of the parcel, the size of the property, because technicians are under pressure to make a sale. By simply automating this and using the actual square footage to complete quotes, they saw a huge boost to accuracy. And then I sort of alluded to some of the other benefits they saw: better conversion, increase in revenue due to increased payment velocity,
Yeah.
better CSAT scores, and better internal satisfaction scores from their technicians and staff, being able to do their jobs without having to like bear the brunt of that assessment portion of the process. So anyway, super cool and similar. There are similar use cases across a bunch of different industries that we can talk about. Um, that's really the point. So I guess the takeaway would be this. If you haven't already, take a look at Smarty products that you're not using. Think about ways that you can solve problems and create kind of less friction for customers and in turn more faith for your company and how it operates. Um, if you are interested, there is in our little Pinpoint hub, we have specific kind of product booths that you can visit. All of these can work in concert with each other, but specifically address enrichment. If you're interested in this, we have a document, a PDF you can download in there that shows all of the property data attributes that we have. To me, this is like the biggest way to really get your juices flowing because there are just about as many use cases as you can come up with as attributes that we offer. So go through that list of attributes, think about how you can use data to, again, bear the brunt of data collection, um, look for ways to create and interact with customer data in a more elegant way, and then come back to us, pitch this idea. Maybe we can help you figure out, maybe we need some additional products. Maybe we need to tie Smarty to some external data sources. But I think you'll find if you sit down and give this some thought, you can come up with some really interesting ways you can supercharge your business. You can yeah, increase
And
both
reduce some
customer
friction
satisfaction.
off of people as well.
Exactly. Reduce friction both internally and make your internal processes better and then make lives better for your customers, which is no matter what industry we work in, that's always something that we're looking to do. So anyway, that's what I've got. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, let me go to the chat here real quick. Yeah, so first question we have here is what types of data comes in with the enrichment? Like
Yeah,
what's in there?
great question. Again, specifically, they are big data sets, so we can get more granular. Generally speaking, what's included under the address enrichment umbrella is U.S. property data, which is the sort of structural, locational, and financial data. So that includes things like build materials, square footage of the property in the building, um, roof type, um, specific amenities like, again, is there a swimming pool? Is there a fireplace? We have some really niche things like, is there a milk house? Is there a sauna? Things like that. It'll also give you financial history and financial transaction data. So, what is the mortgage rate? Who provides the mortgage? What was the previous sales amount? What is the assessment value and market value? All hugely, hugely valuable. And then there are kind of more locational attributes like topography. Um, if it's part of like a construction phase or plan, like at what phase was it? What is it, what's the word I'm looking for, Ryan? If it's like a multi-stage, like
I think phase was one that sounded
is it
pretty
just
right.
called phase? Yeah.
I think
Anyway,
so.
a ton of stuff about the kind of location itself. So that's property data. We have property risk data, which again is via API grabbing anything risk related from the FEMA NRI, the National Risk Index. So that's natural hazards, that's expected annual losses, that's number of risk incidents. Um,
With
again,
expected annual losses, though, what does that return? Like, what do I get with that?
you get so for each natural hazard, you get something like 20 to 30 individual measurements. So it'll give you
Okay. Yeah.
expected annual loss in dollars, expected annual loss
Um,
as a indexed percentage. It's super detailed. This is another one where if you go to the kind of product hub, we have some resources there. Also, our documentation lists all of that. So, sorry,
yeah.
there's
Oh, that's good.
I get excited. So, U.S. property data. U.S. property risk data is the risk data set. We also have one called U.S. georeference data that gives you exact census geo IDs. So block and track data primarily,
Block
as
and
well
track.
as core-based statistical area, things you can use to very easily connect to demographic data sets with the U.S. Census Bureau. So that's great in terms of if you're looking at specific like compliance. If you deal with mortgages and you have to deal with like HMDA, that gives you exact census block and track data that you can bank on. So that's the third one. And then we also have a secondary address enrichment product, secondary address data, where you can count or list verified secondary addresses for a property. So say I'm looking at an apartment building, I can say, hey, give me all the unit numbers that are valid.
Oh,
Obviously, this is great for like mail delivery, but it's great for things like network planning, um, any sort of like potential audience or
yeah.
potential population assessment. So those are the big four currently: property data, property risk data, georeference data, secondary address data. I can also, I think, at this point, tease our next enrichment product will be parcel boundary data. So we'll be able to give you a shape file or a GeoJSON file that will give you the exact shape and size of a property parcel. So great question. And again,
Um,
it's a very powerful family of products.
yeah.
It's also a little overwhelming. So if you have specific questions, I'd love to chat with you.
How can customers and how can people get a hold of this, try it out, see what it's like?
Great question. So just like everything else at Smarty, we have a free 42-day trial. Gives you full access to anything you need. Um, all of these products are also now purchasable online. So if you try it, if you like it, or if you just want to buy a plan to, kick the tires, obviously you can do that with a free trial. That's all available on our pricing page. As well, if you need additional resources or materials, we'd love to chat with you about it.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Ben. I think we're at time. That's excellent. It's cool to see those real world examples that you showed, like of how people have used it in the wild. Sometimes that
Yeah.
paints a better picture.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for listening to me talk. I appreciate it. Hopefully you learned something interesting. I had a fun time talking about it, and I look forward to the ways that you guys figure out how to employ Smarty. One thing that is really fun is seeing how people like make use of our product in ways that we can't even imagine. So good luck and Godspeed. Ryan, thanks for your time. Appreciate you
Yeah,
as
absolutely.
well. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy Pinpoint today. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Ta-ta for now.